I would like to first explain some acronyms concerning Operation Overlord and D-Day. Operation Overlord is the entire invasion to the enlargement to the Seine and Loire rivers. Neptune is the strict amphibious landing of D-Day. Cossack stands for the Chief of Staff to the Supreme Allied Commander, a position held initially by Lieutenant General Frederick Morgan. He was British. This was in 1943. But in December 1943, Eisenhower was named Supreme Commander of SHAEF, or the Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force. SHAEF absorbed Cossack in February of 1944. Again, the reason for this, in 1943, the British had more troops in Europe than the Americans, but by late 1943, the Americans would eclipse the British, and thus they became the senior partner. Eisenhower wanted Bedell Smith as his chief of staff, and then Morgan became one of Smith's deputies. Eisenhower did credit Morgan, though, with planning D-Day. So why Normandy? Why did they select that area as opposed to other areas of northeastern Europe? If the Allies had landed in Belgium and Netherlands, then yes, they would have been closer to Berlin. But the Netherlands and Belgium are too indented and they can be flooded. Just to the south in northern France, you have Dunkirk and Calais, but there was not enough port capacity to supply the groups. Le Havre, at the tip of the Cherbourg Peninsula, was a big port, but the Seine estuary was too wide, and the forces would have to land on both sides of the river and divide the invasion force. Going further south, Brittany was tempting but would have to fight farther to get to Germany and a long distance for Spitfires. Therefore, Normandy is inevitable. It would take 90 days to refit a port, so it would have to have sheltered beaches with easy access for supplies. If the Allies realize this, won't the Germans? No, they never attempted amphibious invasions and thought we would land in Calais. This is a more detailed map of the Normandy area as well as the Cherbourg Peninsula. Le Havre was an important port city. However, we would have to land on these beaches first and break out, plus swing back and take the port of Le Havre for future shipments. All supplies were to be landed on the beaches after artificial harbors are created, then pipelines from across the channel to supply fuel. All previous amphibious landings were before dawn, but needed light so naval and air forces could neutralize German positions. Other factors limited the landing to about 1 hour after low tide, and this plus the need for the airborne troops to have a full moon narrowed the first possible days to the 5th, 6th, and 7th of June. They chose June 5th, but was delayed 24 hours due to bad weather. The Germans knew we were going to land, but where was the key? In early 1944, Rommel built Element C, which were steel gate-like structures. They were 9 feet wide and almost as high to prevent landing craft from coming ashore. The Germans knew we were going to land, but where was the key? Field Marshal von Rundstedt was the commander-in-chief of the West and Rommel the commander of Army Group B. They had different views on where the landing would take place, and more importantly, they did not have command of German air and naval units in the area. Rundstedt believed there was no way to stop an invasion, so keep forces in the rear and attack wherever they land. Rommel believed they should be defeated on the beach. Hitler believed more in Rommel, and his forces were strengthened to include 25 static coast divisions, 16 infantry and parachute divisions, 10 armored and mechanized, and 7 reserve divisions. The air division was weak, with only 319 operating aircraft in France. The German Navy only had 4 destroyers and 39 small torpedo boats. These are pictures of bunkers of the German Atlantic Wall. These bunkers overlook the American landings at Omaha. Notice they're built low to the ground, so very difficult to destroy. The entrances, you crawl through the back. This is what the front of the bunker looks like, with the guns aiming at the Atlantic Ocean. These bunkers were hastily built in 1944 to prepare for an invasion. Obviously, there had been wet cement. This is an imprint of a German boot. To confuse the Germans, the Allies created a deception plan. General Patton created a dummy force across from the port of Calais, hoping that the Germans would think that we are going to invade Calais instead of Normandy. Here is a picture of an inflatable balloon in the shape of a tank. They had hundreds of these tanks as well as tents to create this deception again across from the port of Calais. Over 11,000 Allied aircraft flew 200,000 sorties, which hampered Rommel by bombing crucial rail centers, airfields, and radar installations. After D-Day, the Free French resistance, totaling over 100,000, sabotaged German attempts at reinforcement. Just after midnight on June 6th, 23,400 British and U.S. paratroopers landed on the flanks of the invasion beaches. Nearly 7,000 ships and landing craft were employed to bombard German positions at 6:30 a.m. 5 Allied divisions at Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. Altogether, 75,215 British and Canadian troops and 57,500 U.S. troops landed on D-Day. There were 4,300 British and Canadian casualties and 6,000 for the United States. Neptune was terminated on June 3rd. Once again, here are the 5 beaches. The Americans landed at Utah and Omaha. The British at Gold. Juno was the Canadians, and the British also at this beach for Sword. The most complicated were the Omaha landings because of the high bluffs. The Americans would be caught on the beaches. This is the beach for Omaha. When you view this beach in D-Day films, you would think that this was rocky. To my surprise, this was a regular tourist beach. This picture here is of that Element C, those gate-like structures that Rommel had built in the water to hamper people from landing as well as landing craft. Notice in the background the high bluffs. When the Americans landed, over top are where those German bunkers were located. They were shooting out to the ships, and the ships were trying to shell and destroy these bunkers. The Americans were being shot at as they were landing, and as you can see, they could not get a clear path up to these bunkers. So many of them hunkered down at the base of these bluffs. The reason I took a picture of this house, with all the shelling that took place, this house was not damaged during the D-Day landings, which just completely blew my mind. So that is why I took that picture. Neptune was officially terminated on the 30th of June after 850,279 men, 148,803 vehicles, and 570,505 tons of supplies had been landed. A major victory for the Americans, British, and Canadians for landing all these supplies. The Germans were not allowed to push the Allies into the sea. I realize that this picture is grainy. If you recall, I stated earlier that the Allies would have to create artificial harbors. Ingeniously, they had hollow concrete slabs that they floated over from Britain. They unplugged them, they sank, and the Allied ships would line in front of these, and this is where they would land their tanks, also their fuel, as they would get them to the beaches. So this was critical to the creation of artificial harbors for D-Day. There are 2 American cemeteries in Normandy. This is the main one. If any of you have seen the movie Saving Private Ryan, it is a story of the Nealon brothers. During the Civil War, the United States often employed all the sons of a family into a specific regiment. If that regiment had been totally destroyed, it might have wiped out all the males from a family. Thus, they learned from that, and they made a decision that if there are a few males in a family, they would make sure that not all of them would be killed in war. Two of the Nealon brothers had died at D-Day. A third was thought to have been killed by the Japanese. So after D-Day, a special group was formed to find Private Ryan Nealon. They would find Private Ryan in the interior and bring him home to safety. However, that third brother that was thought to have been lost by the Japanese was still alive. This is still considered an important tourist site just because of the movie Saving Private Ryan. Also, the son of Teddy Roosevelt is buried at the Omaha Cemetery, although he was not killed at D-Day. He would be killed in France on July 12th, but due to his stature, he was asked to be buried at this cemetery.